Well, good morning, and it's great to be back in Huntsville, a city that my family and I called home for 4 years. And then a great thank you to all the organizers, but of course, Lieutenant General Retired Dick Micah. Always appreciate the invitation. It's so great to be back. You know, it's fun to see a lot of familiar faces too, as I look along the front line. And I remember back as a young lieutenant in Germany, where there was a Lieutenant Gainey, a Lieutenant Gibson, a Captain Carbler, right? And I've heard some familiar faces of old bosses. And years ago, our brigade commander was then Colonel Larry Dodgen, which has been mentioned and very esteemed here in Huntsville. And I was reminded, though, as a young lieutenant, I thought that a colonel would just reach out and touch me and I'd vanish, right? These old, crusty colonels, they were so intimidating. And God forbid, you'd see a sergeant major, right? Sergeant Major Foley. But now I walk into the Pentagon and I wonder to myself, when did colonels become young? And so I think there are probably many of us that have that thought. Hey, so I think my chart's up here. On the upper left, we'll start with the threat, which really drives everything. The objective is to stay ahead of that threat, anticipate the threat. The problem is that threat is evolving so quickly that it's outpacing our processes. You could argue, and I have argued, that UAS are the new IED, except they're deadlier and more dangerous. They surveil, target, and deliver effects from the air. Let me start by telling a little personal story back in 2017, where I was in Israel observing a celebration of the old city. And like many have seen now since then, but for me it was the first time, I saw a bunch of green dots in the sky. Form of a lion. Form of a menorah. And as I heard the oohs and the ahs and how impressive it was, as a lifelong air defender, all I could think was, oh, that's a problem. That's a real problem. And here we are seeing that come to fruition. Then September 14, 2019, as the DCG of SMD, I was briefed on the Iranian attacks on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, their Aramco facilities, where you had a combination of drones and cruise missiles. For me, kind of the first time I had seen a complex attack that in my recent memory. So I'm a bit of a slow learner, but that complex attack is really prevalent on the battlefield today. Then a string of events. Azerbaijan and Armenia in 2020. The Houthi attacks on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Later, attacks in the Red Sea. Ukraine and Russia, lessons learned. Tower 22 in Jordan. Continued attacks in Iraq and Syria. Then the 12-day war. And maybe the unthinkable, an attack on AUAV. Largely a very peaceful place, but not on that day. Most recently, Spiderweb. I think everybody's familiar with that. But I was recently out at an event with a bunch of individuals from the Five Eyes, and I asked them, I figured across the world after the Spiderweb attacks, air defenders were called into their leadership and asked two questions. Number one, are we vulnerable? Number two, how do we prevent a similar attack? Really tough questions that I think every air defender is struggling with. The JCO, under the leadership of General Gainey, was rightly focused on Group 3 one-way attacks in CENTCOM. You could argue the most dangerous and the most likely threat. These aircraft were moving faster, they were maneuvering, and they were flying high and low to escape detection. Then we started thinking Groups 1 and 2 swarm and mass attack, right? Just like Spiderweb. The JCO has always been focused on outpacing the threat. Our last few demonstrations have focused on Group 3, one-way attack, mass or swarms, and then most recently on a contested EMI environment. All true threats and environments on the modern battlefield. Then we're finding there are multiple ways now, and it's just changed for me over the last year. Multiple ways of these aircraft and these drones to navigate. It used to be just an RF uplink, downlink. Then it was GPS and waypoints. Then you had 5G using cell towers. Now, optics. Just load a couple of pictures in there and it'll navigate by sight, and first-person drones. And now we've gone full circle. It's kind of amazing. Tethered fiber optic drones, again, to avoid being detected. And then, of course, we're seeing mass. But let me also say one thing about the navigation. We're also seeing now a single platform being navigated in 3, 4 different ways. So think about that. You take off and you're flying maybe RF, you're flying with waypoints. But then all of a sudden you switch over to optics, right? I mean, the threat is evolving extremely fast. Well, last year I talked about dilemmas and realities, choices. This year there's been a huge shift, and I think we've all seen it, by Congress, the administration, and the Department of Defense. And what it is right there in the middle, Homeland Defense. And I would tell you that integrated air missile defense and counter-UAS are at the forefront of Homeland Defense. First, Guam Defense Systems, a joint integrated fight in support of our national defense strategy and placing priority on the Indo-Pacific, which we have been trying to do for so many years. The full threat is faced in Guam. And then the southern border, right? In my mind, a tremendous opportunity to enforce interagency collaboration, test systems and technology, and then really push for policy reform. And I can tell you from experience, the kit and the technology, that's pretty easy. The policy, that's going to be a rough row ahead. And then lastly, air missile defense. We talked a lot about that in Homeland. General Gainey mentioned the 49th GMD Battalion, Rich Holy and his team, and their focus on the very important mission of the National Capital Region. And then recently, the NORTHCOM commander is now the synchronizer for Homeland Defense and counter-UAS. These are all big changes. And I would tell you the full breadth of these threats are always going to require a systems approach, a layered approach, and there's a new term, it's not new to us, but you're going to find this, and you're hearing a lot of seniors talk about, protect the defender. So some of these larger systems that are designed to defend against cruise missiles, TDMs, well, they might be vulnerable to a spiderweb type attack. So you have to defend and have systems to then protect that defender. And then services approach. Last year's dilemmas are quickly becoming realities. Every service must address counter-UAS, whether at home, abroad, afloat, ashore, at echelon. And I would tell you one of the big challenges there is command and control, a common C2 capability. Regarding those service approaches, so if you look off to the right on the chart, clockwise you have the Army Coyote, U.S. Marine Corps, MADIS system, the Navy SEA-RAM, SEA-RAM, the Air Force Thor system, and all of these are just examples. Each one of our services are approaching this very challenging problem in a very different way, and I would offer, really, in the last couple of years, each one of the services is really focusing on this problem set, and largely because I think a lot of our leaders have recognized, and as all we've recognized, this threat's not going anywhere. So the United States Marine Corps and the Army, I would offer, taking very similar approaches to this problem. They're looking at formations at echelon, unit, and operator common kit. Really the protection, everybody's responsibility, down to squad level. And then the skill specific, the professional defenders, air defenders, really looking at those larger missions in support of a commander, be it a combatant commander, corps commander, division commander, JTF commander. But the Marine Corps and Army are approaching this problem set very similar. I would offer, probably needed to be a little more collaboration there, but I'll talk about that in a second. And then the Navy tackling this problem both at ashore and afloat. I think there's a realization that those ships have to come back to port. But of course, what's the Navy built to do? And they are realizing that they've performed very well, but they've really pursued some more affordable solutions, and they've really opened up the innovation at sea. And then lastly, the Air Force, leveraging APKWS air-to-air hadn't been done. So these are innovations that are happening very quickly right in front of us, and they continue, the Air Force, to develop their AVAD system. And then lastly, on the lower right, you can see some of the guidance. We've seen executive orders, DoD policy, and interagency collaboration unparalleled in years past. But I would offer that collaboration, it's a tough one, because not everybody is compelled to collaborate. And then on the lower right, I'd offer about the path forward. In the last 2 years, in this position, my team and I have looked at this problem set, and we gleaned all the great work from General Gainey, and he built that team. And we looked and we assessed, and we decided that how could we, as an organization, get better? And it really came down to 3 things, and you see them there: resources, authorities, and access. And that access might be the most important thing, access to the decision makers, regular access to the decision makers. Now, I had an opportunity to speak to former directors of JIADO, and JIADO is kind of a bad word sometimes around the Pentagon. But you can't get away from a JIADO-like organization that had some success, that addressed those IED threats. But I would tell you the common thread, we had our assessment about right: resources, authorities, and access. Each of the individuals and leaders that I talked to, they gave a resounding same message. Their independence was a huge part of their success, and that access to then, one thing to entice and enable, but then maybe a little more controversial, to compel. And that's what we're talking about. And so I think as we go forward as a nation, tackling this problem that's very serious and not going anywhere, I think that would be my assessment, and I think that we'll see the leadership looking for fresh approaches as we continue to combat counter-UAS or UAS threat. So thanks a bunch. I'm working to be brief, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the information you shared with us. First question from the audience. Can you scope what constitutes a swarm?
Yeah, I tell you, so this is one of the things that the JCO has spent a lot of time doing. We look at problems that a lot of other people, they think about, but they don't think about it entirely. So for example, one of the areas is, what's the definition of low collateral, right? And I would tell you, we've done some work on that to really look at what is low collateral. And then swarm, I would tell you, there's not a great deal of, there are definitions doctrinally, but there's not a lot of agreement throughout the community. So for me, I think mass attack is just throwing the kitchen sink at you. You've got a bunch of independent drones being thrown at a variety of targets. For me, a swarm, now those drones maybe are communicating together. Now they're looking at how they might have independent missions, they might be redirected, and then of course, we talk a lot about artificial intelligence and how that might help, at least from lethal one-way attack launched effects.
Okay, thank you. Can you talk to us about what role do you envision AI in the counter operations?
Yeah, I think it's what we've talked about a lot here in these forums, and a lot of other speakers have talked about. It's really taking the burden off of the operators. Though I don't know that we're there yet. I think we're still going to have, and when I talk about protection is everybody's responsibility, you want those systems that you can just flip a switch and it does what it needs to do. Maybe it alerts you that there's a threat in the area and you might have to seek cover or concealment. But then you're going to need the experts with the more advanced threats, and that's going to be air defenders potentially, or individuals that receive additional training, not just the basic soldier skills. So as we see that continue to develop, I'm encouraged that we're taking the right approach. And then AI will take that burden off of the operator. And in fact, I'm seeing some of that now, where in a case that the operators will be able to move faster, address, because swarm and mass attack are a real deal, and we're going to see that. And so we need to enable those individuals to make very quick decisions and allow the system to make decisions for us as well. And I think that's probably going to be one of the main benefits of AI.
Yes, sir. Can you discuss technologies, or can you discuss some of the emerging technologies that you're excited about in the CUAS program?
Yeah, well, again, I talk a lot, and actually my team kind of teases me about the breadth of the threat requiring a system of systems approach. And so that's the real key that you take away, is there is no one solution to any of these threats. I would tell you, of course, EW is really important. I would offer that high-powered microwave is super, but I think a lot of us are recognizing that it has its limitations. So it'll be interesting to see how new and unique approaches to not just provide a final protective fire, but how do we extend that range out? And some of that's TTP, right? Understanding how to extend out, doing your air IPB and having maybe kill boxes and ambushes, right? Things that, as air defenders, we learned many, many years ago. Of course, lasers are coming on, directed energy. Really great opportunity here, but again, limited. But I would tell you, in our community, I think most of us here would say, you know, we've been hearing we're 5 years away for the last 30 years, right? And here we are. We actually are seeing effects on the battlefield. I think the big challenge is we're seeing great effect on groups 1 and 2, the smaller quadcopters, and very quick effects from the laser. But we'd like to see where we can advance and move on to groups 3 and larger and see where those lasers might go. And again, I think this is an area where maybe we're going to look at both abroad, where it is really a great opportunity to go out and test these technologies. But then you've got the opportunity at home now. Are we going to push those bounds? Or are we going to look at directed energy? And is that something that we're going to use in the homeland? And I would offer that when I talk about policy, the FAA, rightly so, has a very different view on aircraft, right? They're concerned about safety. An air defender is worried about defending whatever they've been asked to defend. So I think there's a lot of great technology. And then I guess I'd align with General Gainey, who years ago kind of offered up that kinetic is king. Maybe my words, not yours exactly, but I think that's another area that as we see these threats evolve and the larger threats, you are going to have to stay ahead. And you have to build effectors that are more affordable and that can address multiple threats, but they're going to have real improved performance.
Can you discuss how you're accelerating acquisitions and embracing early learning through tests?
I would tell you that's one of the things that we're challenged to do. You know, when you only have a certain, it goes back to my points about resources and authorities, and the resources is really about funding. And so I guess if You know, we want to have small, lean organizations, but if you want to do more, sometimes you don't know. I had a boss that used to say you don't do more with less, you do less with less, right? And so my thought is that there's an opportunity to accelerate, but we don't maximize that because I think we're going to need an infusion of those resources. But I do think there are opportunities. So in other words, I think that it's great that the Army and the Transformation and Contact are pushing kit out to soldiers. We're pushing capability out to formations across the world to help proof and principle, right? But I would offer too, sometimes, you know, God forbid I say this, but sometimes we place too much on a single soldier saying, oh, that's a piece of junk. And we should probably ask the question, well, okay, what were the environments? Were you trained on this? What did you see? What were the effects, right? And so I guess what I'd offer there is fully instrumented demonstrations. I'm still a big fan, but I think we have to do them faster and we have to iterate more quickly.
Okay, final question. Could you please expand on some of the regulatory and legislative challenges with implementing the counter-UAS capability?
Yeah, boy. All right. I thought this was supposed to be a softball question. Yeah, I would tell you that, again, it depends on your perspective, right? So from the military, we take a very different perspective than a lot of the other individuals in the interagency. But we are finding common ground. I think, again, places like the southern border and across the United States with NORTHCOM, who is already naturally aligned and working with a lot of interagency partners. So I think there are opportunities there. Of course, the right to self-defense is never denied. So that's where you kind of start. But then the process of 130I, and which I would offer again, just in the last year and a half, 2 years, I've seen a huge interest in acceleration in the area where there was a caution to not move too far forward because of maybe posse comitatus and the Army's role in how we would perform our duties here stateside. But then I think Congress, you know, they really feel that they've given us all the authorities we need, and they were looking for some action. And so I think, at least in the Army, we're seeing an acceleration of individuals for installations going out and working to get those 130I authorities to then operate kit on the ground. Now the challenge is that there is that DOTMA PF trail, right? And so not every installation is created equal. The larger installation with more individuals, they might even have air defenders on their post, and they can task those air defenders to start training on the equipment and then train the trainer and then expand out. But if you're a small little arsenal, you may not have the benefit of all those folks. So a lot of challenges, but I am encouraged that I think there's a dialogue occurring from the senior leaders and across our government, because again, this is not just a DoD problem. This is not just a whole of government problem. I think what we're finding, and you're seeing across the world, this is a whole nation issue. And so we're going to have to continue to work through it. Policy is one of the main issues. So thanks for those questions. Thanks for the opportunity to come. And it's always great to see a bunch of great friends in Command Sergeant Major Foley. I do apologize. I understand that I owe you I don't know what I owe you, but I owe you. And but anyway, maybe that's good enough. I've called myself out in front of everybody. Hey, all right. Well, hey, thanks for the questions. And again, General Formica, thank you.
How's everybody doing this morning? Is there somebody out there? Everybody doing good. Hey, I appreciate the time to be able to talk with you today. This is a really important conference to me. I've been here a few times before. It's really good to be back. I want to thank all those that had a hand in putting this together and continue to keep this the quality event that it is. And special thanks to General Formica to continue to invite me back despite my performance. But I love to have the opportunity to talk about space and space as a warfighting domain. What I like to do today, if I can, is a little different than what I usually do in a brief like this. I think this is probably going to be my last time to talk in front of this forum in uniform. At the end of 42 years, I couldn't decide if I was willing to fully commit to the Army, so I figured if you can't commit, you might as well go ahead and get out. But I'd like to talk a little bit about why space meant so much to me across a 40-year career. So General Formica is already concerned about the clock. As soon as I say 40-year career, I know he's thinking this will go a couple of hours. I hope so. But we got 30 minutes, I'll watch the clock and see what we get to. But before I even start with that, before I dive into that, I just want to put one thing up front to make sure when we talk about space as a warfighting domain, and to set the context for what I really want to leave a message here today is, you know, at the United States Space Command, we have a guiding principle, and that is that we're going to secure peace. And we do that through strength to show a deterrent stance. And to do that, we have to be very well prepared for conflict in our area of operations, the space domain. And if deterrence fails, we have to ensure that we are ready to fight and to win. And that drives everything that General Whiting, the commander for U.S. Space Command, my boss, steers the United States Space Command to get at in a big way. And you're a huge part of that, no matter what role you play in the international security enterprise. You have the role of helping the United States Space Command do its job, even if you don't realize that. In 1984, I was a young corporal on a Special Forces A team in the National Guard. And I remember the first time I really went to the field and did some of the exquisite work that we do, the way that we did communications. We did not, just to foreshadow, we did not have satellite communications. What we did is we took antenna wire and we measured it out to the length of half of a high frequency wavelength. And we put insulating material on each side of that, and then we took an end and threw it up in a tree, and took another end and threw it up in a tree, and we did high frequency communications. Now, if you do that right, you can talk around the world. There's a lot of things you got to fight through to make that happen. It's cumbersome, takes a while to do it, but I thought it was slick as could be because look at these comms. You know, it's certainly farther than my AM radio will go. And of course, our comms guy was doing we're doing Morse code. I mean, no kidding, Morse code. I used to know some of the Morse code. I don't know what I just said there. Hopefully it was nothing that insulted anybody. But that's the way we had to operate. And navigation was all about a map and a compass, a Lanzetta compass. I still have my Lanzetta compass from 1984. Please don't tell the Army that. And we got really good at how to use all of that. And so let's, you know, understand this advanced way of warfighting. To me, back then, I guess it was an advanced way of warfighting.
I forgot to get his name.
So now fast forward a few years to 1990 and 91, Desert Storm. And I was in an Apache unit flying OH-58s, Vietnam era OH-58 helicopters.
And like, did the other
so what we had for our instrument species was an airspeed indicator, a compass, magnetic compass, attitude indicator,
like that kind of
and a mechanism that would take the magnetic compass and give us a gyro-based head.
that, and then find the other soldiers. I was looking.
That's what we have for navigation.
As he left.
And in Germany, it worked okay, because in Germany, the maps that we used in Germany, if you went out and looked at a pasture and there was a brick wall along the backside of that pasture, it had been there for 400 years. It had been mapped for 400 years. It was pretty accurate. The bridges had been there for centuries. The river had been there for eons. It was just really easy to land nav in Germany. Take that unit and then put them in the desert in Saudi Arabia, and then going into Iraq and Kuwait as part of our surge into Iraq as part of Desert Storm. And things changed. I remember walking into our Intel NCO had set up a map board on MRE boxes, and we were missing 2 of our map sheets. And so he took poster block paper and he put them in those holes, and then he drew lines across so at least we could do the measurements and get our headings and distances. And when you walked into the tent, you couldn't immediately tell what was a map and what was butcher block, because it was just desert. There wasn't much to use. There was one east-west road, a hardball road, asphalt road, that was 20 kilometers long. Because that road was still there, but it was covered under sand. They built a new road that wasn't on the map. So the one road you had to navigate off of was wrong. So navigation was difficult. Before we went across the burn, we had a red-headed major, and the fact the major was red-headed has nothing to do with anything other than I can remember it. I remember this because he brought magic with him. He brought a voodoo box. And he said, hey, if you take this, and just a handful of them for the whole battalion, if you take this system, it will tell you where you are with great accuracy for part of the day. And the reason it was part of the day is because in 1990 we only had a partial GPS constellation. He said for part of the day, the box will tell you that it doesn't know where it is. I'm like, okay. He said for part of the day, the box will tell you where it is, but it will be wrong. And I'm like, you can have that back. I don't know if that's worth the wait to put in the helicopter or not. And so we struggled through that, but I'll tell you what I learned as a young lieutenant in the United States Army was the great power that space-based capabilities can provide you in a fight where the terrain is trying to kill you, darkness is trying to kill you, oil smoke is something you haven't had to deal with, it's trying to kill you, and there are people with weapons that are trying to kill you. And you're trying to navigate in that, and when the GPS worked, it was glorious. I mean, you felt good. And then when it went bad, you had this knot in your stomach of, I've really got to watch my navigation. Same thing with satellite communications. We had some limited satellite communications, and the distances that we traveled in Desert Storm, it mattered to have those kind of comms because we would outrun our line of distance communications. Still a problem in some places today. So that's kind of my introduction to, hey, space is really important at the beginning of my career. In 1996, I was in Korea, and if you remember watching the news, there was a North Korean commando element that had come ashore, had done a couple of weeks reconnaissance, questionable whether they were trying to do an assassination operation as well. And then as the submarine came in to take them out on the east side of South Korea near Kongdong Air Force Base, the submarine ran aground. The commandos and the Navy thermited the submarine, so they burned the submarine, came ashore, and then began to evade and tried to make their way back to North Korea. We were part of an air element supporting 43,000 South Korean soldiers as they tried to find the spies as they worked their way trying to get to North Korea with pretty good success. But the reason the North Koreans were in that plight is because, if you believe this part of the context, is that before the fall of the wall, they had gotten some assistance from the Soviet Union, and that had fallen away. And now they didn't have access to satellite imagery, so they had lost their access to space, and they had to go to these great measures that cost them dearly in the processes. So again, another indication to a young captain now of how important space is and access to space is. In 2010, I worked with my good friend, now General Zellman, and then after him, we Colonel in the F-840s, Bolio, about counter-UAS. At the very beginning of when counter-UAS was a concern, and we could kind of see and envision early on where we were going to be with UAS capabilities and threats in the future. And it's kind of where we thought it would be. If you read some of the books out there recently, like Unit X and some of those others, they talk about how that missionary kind of snuck up on us. I'll talk about that in just a minute about innovation. The last thing I want to talk about that I learned in the early part of Afghanistan for space is we begin to get things right, really right. You can see the immediate impacts of having access to space in the early parts of the global war on terrorism, and we were doing very well on that. There's one example that I will not go into the details on here today. I'll just tell you this, that space got it wrong, and in the process of getting it wrong, we lost a number of special operations soldiers, one of those that I had worked with pretty closely before, and that stung. And I think from that I learned more than maybe anything else, this passion for getting space and getting space right, it matters. Now that's all terrestrial support, from space. We haven't gotten to the idea of what does warfighting in the space AOR look like. Before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about innovation, and I think the best way to talk about innovation would probably be this obvious example. Can I get the next slide? So there you go. Any questions on innovation? No, it's a cow. So here's a quick story on something that we should have known better. We should have. My brother and I grew up on a farm, not in the city, not in the suburban area. So we did a lot of things together. We were best friends and brothers when we weren't fighting. And we played a lot of one-on-one basketball. I don't know how to pass a basketball because it was just me and him. We got pretty good at one-on-one though. My dunking was a little short, but we would play some basketball, and then we got bored with that. We'd take tennis balls and we'd throw them up against the side of the house on the roof when Mom and Dad weren't there. And like Steve McQueen, if you've seen The Great Escape, don't kind of throw the ball around. And darn it, the cows weren't just right there, in the front yard of the pasture. So we pick out a cow and try to take a tennis ball and hit this does get to a space story, I promise. Take a tennis ball and pick a cow and try to hit it, and then, we continue. The cows love the game, I'm sure. But then, we upped our game a little bit. We bought an airplane. No kidding. My brother was a senior in high school. I was a freshman in junior college and had just finished basic training in AIT with the Army, so I had a little bit of money. And we bought a Cessna 150. I just got my pilot's license. I wanted to work on some IFR time, and so I bought a 150 two-seater that was IFR qualified, hard to find. It was a trainer. But we got it, and we go up and fly a little bit. My brother wanted to learn to fly blind in one eye, so he couldn't, so I'd fly us around. But we began to take a bag of tennis balls with us, and we'd fly all over the cows, and we'd pick one out, and we'd try to hit the cow with a tennis ball, which is impossible. And so then we try to hit any cow in the herd with a tennis ball, and then we just try to hit the pasture with a tennis ball. But it mattered to me because that whole story I just gave you came back to me in a flash when I had a special operations person come to me and said, hey, look, we have UAVs that are trying to drop grenades on our head. And I don't know the best way to tackle this. We talk to air defense, we talk to different folks, industry, etc. What is it that space can do to help in this environment? Now, I'm not going to talk about the answers that we came to there. What I want to talk about is the fact, how did we miss that? How did we as a community not see that threat coming the way that it was coming? If two farm boys out there can figure out how to drop tennis balls on a cow and understand that's a possibility, how did we miss that? Where was our lack of imagination that we couldn't get to that? And I'll tell you, the Honorable Locust talked about that last night too, some at our dinner, about it's not just the technologies that are coming, it's the people. That's what I would underscore more than anything else. It is the people. It is you in this room that's going to get us to a place that gets us ahead of the threat. Keep that imagination that we should have had from a very simple idea. Next slide. General Whiting does a very good job of talking about in our warfighting roles that we have moral responsibilities. I think if you're part of the mission area, we all share those moral responsibilities. And that's to ensure that we can provide capabilities to the joint force in space that are so important. All those lessons I learned along my career path that we use and so
I was making sure because I was trying to I was watching that. I was like,
no news story that the United States and the world is dependent on space capabilities just for the way we lead our lives. The military is absolutely designed around our ability to use space systems, and General Whiting did a great job of explaining that in detail in his field
audio sounds good
earlier in the week. So it's important for us to be able to protect those capabilities, make sure that they're provided, but then how do we protect and defend them against threats that demonstrate that they want to take those capabilities away. While I was learning how important space capabilities were along my career path, our adversaries were learning the same lessons by observing what we were doing. They learned two major things. One, it's not a fair fight if someone has the asymmetrical advantage of space, so we want to have that for ourselves. And we want to be able to take that away from the United States and its allies to try to level the playing field, which we don't want a fair fight. We want a very unfair fight that we know we're going to win. So how do you protect and defend those? That's part of our moral responsibilities. And the last thing is, as other adversaries continue to increase their use of space capabilities, how do we prevent those from being used against the joint force? So I think that's a good context for the way that we think about space as a warfighting domain. Next slide, please. I'm not going to spend much time on this. I think most of you are probably familiar, but we have certain missions that are given to us by law, those top three. Then we have the President signs the Unified Command Plan, and the fact that we're focused on space operations shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, but that's everything from PNT to ISR to missile warning to all those systems. The fact that we do global sensor manager missions gets us into the missile defense environment, and we share capabilities. And we continue to build capabilities that allow us to work in both space domain awareness and understanding what's in our AOR, tied to the ability to do warning and tracking of missiles, and part of the missile defense, missile defeat, and missile warning mission areas. Global SATCOM has become a critical part of how we operate. We are a global force. We have to always think of ourselves as a global force, even when we focus in on regional fights. It's critical how we do that. We talked a little bit about the missile defense already. As the space joint force provider, we're really more the joint force recommender of the best way to posture and position our limited space forces to get the most effect based on the priorities of the President and the Secretary of Defense. And lastly, we do have our own area where we'll do our fighting in. And even though we are absolutely tied to terrestrial, if you have a satellite that can't talk to the Earth, then what's the point of the satellite? So we know that we have a terrestrial tether, but our fighting is focused on protecting and defending our assets and taking away capabilities from our adversaries that could hurt our joint force in our AOR. We like to make a point of saying space isn't special, but it is unique. And we say not special because the principles of war, the way we think about warfighting for hundreds of years, still applies in so many cases and how we think about what that future conflict, warfighting in our domain looks like. But it's also, it is unique. Kepler applies in ways that we don't see on the Earth. Newton also applies, so we bring that with us. But so we think of it in that way. I will tell you that on the trans-regional missile defense, one thing that I've learned, and I think this is really true, and we're getting closer to that in venues and forums like this, to understanding the convergence between missile defense, missile warning missions, and the space operations missions. And in a lot of ways, they are becoming the same mission. I briefed that in Congress, and that resonates with me. I think it resonated with a lot of experts out there. Hopefully that resonates with you. And I see us continuing to build that closer interoperability and interaction that allows us to maximize both of those mission areas as we move forward together. Next slide. I'm not going to talk deeply about the threats because I know they've been talked about a lot. I could not put a threat slide in here because everything we do is based on what do we think our adversaries are going to do. China is our pacing, our near-peer adversary in space. Next slide. And Russia, despite its war that it has now, the conflict it has in Ukraine and other areas that it looks like it continues to monitor for its own security issues or concerns. Despite all of that, it still continues to fund and remains an opponent in space, and it stays very active in threatening our space-based capabilities while it builds its own. Next slide. Talking about organizational structure for U.S. Spacecom, the main takeaway I give you for this slide is I'm not going to go through each one of the units, but it's joint. Every service is recognized on this chart except for one. Coast Guard, I don't think we put them on the chart, but Coast Guard is part of the United States Space Command. We always have at least one member from the Coast Guard, but we work closely with them. In recent activity where we work closely with INDOPACOM, some of the work that we did was space support to the Coast Guard as they conducted operations in support of INDOPACOM's mission area. I do want to highlight that we do have those 5 mission centers in the middle, so it gets at some of those mission areas we talked about. The Combined Space Operations Center, which is providing theater space support, so that was that first moral responsibility. National Space Defense Center, the next 2 moral responsibility areas of being able to protect and defend our assets on orbit, and then to mitigate those of our adversaries. Missile warning is into the sensor management piece that we talked about in our missile warning focused mission area, along with our the JOPSI, the Joint Overhead Persistent IR Center, and then our navigation center, which is focused on PNT, position, navigation, timing, and GPS. Okay, next slide, please. This is a big part of what General Whiting talks about, and this is really important, is the fact that we consider space operations and our part of missile defense operations a team sport. There's no service that can do this on its own. There's no country that can do this on its own. Industry can't do this on its own. It takes the whole enterprise, ecosystem, academia as well. We work so closely with the universities and think tanks to help try to get ahead of that innovative piece of, if I can drop a tennis ball on a cow, I can drop a grenade on a cow. What's the equivalent of those innovative things and imagination we should be putting into play in the space fight? It takes that whole team and all those different perspectives to get us to that point. I would highlight, because you're going to have the panel here in just a minute, on the left-hand side of the chart there, that probably our closest interactions to date has been with INDOPACOM in terms of integration for warfighting from a space perspective. In my personal opinion, having watched the growth over the last 3 or 4 years with our Tier 1, our highest level exercises, we have come a long way, and we are really doing close-in integration with the activities and the actions and the objectives of INDOPACOM in space. We are almost one voice in everything that we do there, and that continues to grow. Allies critical, and I could spend the next hour just talking about allies easily, about all the work that we've done as we continue to stand up activities like Olympic Defender, where General Whiting is the commander of that organization as it stands up, and we're getting closer to real operations all the time. We've done real operations, but they grow as we continue to work closely with our allies, and we grow the number of allies that we work with space. People like to talk about space. It's exciting, and it has real impact when you get into the nuts and bolts of it and do it right. So it helps us in forming strong alliances and those partnerships. But lastly, with the industry, how are we going to change things? Really, the innovation that's leading us today is more out of industry than anywhere else. You know the story of how we've turned that on its head from the early astronaut days, where the government kind of led the space industry. The industry is leading the government today, and it's you that are going to help us come up with the right ways, the innovative ways to continue to stay ahead of our adversaries. So that leads us to the next slide. We're back to, okay, so we had a problem with our cow. We should have known better. What do we do now? Next slide. Go ahead, Bill. So we have priorities at U.S. Space Command that we're focused on. You're probably tracking these already, but it's to be prepared and postured and ready for the fight. We talked about that up front. To be able to counter the threats that we see in our domain, in our AOR. We talked about strengthening partnerships and continue to focus on, beyond words and PowerPoint slides, how are we actually providing additional advantage, warfighting capability and advantage, and then how do we practice, how do we rehearse, exercise those, and continue to have a fast turn loop on what we learn from our exercises and experiments to put requirements back into the system and move at the speed that we have to. That was another thing that Honorable Norquist talked about, is where speed maybe wasn't the focus for our acquisitions processes in the past, it is today, it has to be. And I think we see that sea change occurring today, will continue to have to continue. Next slide. That leads you into some specific areas that we're focused on at U.S. Spacecom. Your takeaway from reading through those 10 very quickly should tell you that those are warfighting-focused mission areas. General Whiting continues to focus on that like a laser beam of light. The one that I would highlight that is new is the fifth one from the bottom, Sustained Space Operations and Maneuver. That wasn't in our list of focus areas last year, it is this year. And we are really putting energy into that, because as we've gotten our feet under us, as we've established United States Space Command, and we continue to look at what's next in terms of being able to really do fighting, warfighting in our AOR, we have to think about maneuvering. We have to think about the normalized joint functional areas for the joint force, which includes maneuver in a way that we haven't thought about it in space before. Now And that gets into a couple of things. It's how can you replenish fast enough to equate maneuver if you lose a system, not to maneuver a new system in place, to take its place. How do I do logistics to be able to support my capabilities either on the ground terrestrial or on orbit? And then, no kidding, how do I dogfight in space? How do I outmaneuver and outlast a threat that is set on trying to destroy my capability, either kinetically or non-kinetically? So as you look through those, you see at the very top, we're talking about integrated space fires. And everything else is kind of driven by the ability for us to achieve effects, either kinetic or non-kinetic, as adversaries continue to look at how they want to attack our systems, how we protect and defend those systems. Next slide. If you're interested in talking to our requirements folks at US Spacecom, our J8, this is the entryway into them. He asked me to put this out here as our commercial to you. It lets you go in and answer some basic questions about, what are our top priorities, what are your requirements, and can get you time with our J8 to talk about the way ahead for our capabilities. I think that's really important to put that out here because of the close partnership we have to have with industry to be able to succeed in what we want to do. Next slide. So that completes my brief. I think I have a few minutes for questions. I also have one more slide that is not a cow, but it's a really cute kitten. So you tell me if you want to ask a question or if you want to see the kitten slide. What do we vote? Kitten slide? Questions? All right, we'll start with a kitten slide. So the quick story on this is change happens. I am not a cat person. But when I was at the Prague Space Symposium on Father's Day, I got a 3 o'clock in the morning text because I'm in the Czech Republic, and being congratulated by my wife on my new gift for Father's Day. Change can happen, and it can be good. And this is like the best pet we've ever had. Now that's classified information. You can't share that with my wife. But that is Obi-Wan, the cat. Apparently being mugged in that first picture. I'm not sure. But change can happen. Be ready for change. It can be unexpected. And if you manage it correctly, change can be really good for us. Okay, with that, we'll see if we have time for any questions. Oh no, put the kitten back up. What are you doing?
Thank you, sir. Yes, we do have a few questions from the audience, and I very much appreciate you having the time to take them. Okay. How do you see the relation between space fires and space-based interceptors as the implications of space as a warfighting domain sink in? And as we acquire more space fires, might it contribute to the emergence of SBIs?
So the easy answer there is yes. I think that the idea of what you mean from space interceptors, and you've seen that discussion in the open press about the possibility of those, I think that would be considered a kinetic aspect of space fires, integrated fires. And so to me, that's kind of an obvious way that we'll look to in the future, potentially, for capabilities. But you can't do that in isolation. Those 10 things that are on the list all have to go together. You still got to have, how do you command and control those systems? How do you do the targeting of that? How do you do the space domain awareness? So anything that can be integrated fires for non-kinetic or what might be kinetic fires, I think in my mind that would be part of, if it's operating in our AOR, US Spacecom should have some role in the targeting processes and the execution of whatever capability you would describe for the future force in integrated space fires. I don't know who asked the question. If that answered your question, if it didn't, feel free to ask a follow-up.
We have another question, sir. What is the kitty's name?
What is what?
The kitty's name.
Obi-Wan. So the lightsaber picture I didn't have up here, but we'll get that later. Not the cow? The cows never get the right level of respect. I don't know.
Quite true, sir. Quite true. Question, how will all these disparate organizations come together to shape Golden Dome architecture and ensure it meets the needs of the users and operators?
Well, so if any kind of organization that we had that would be designed to protect the homeland defense, and I'll talk in terms of homeland defense. We work that today. We work closely with Northern Command, we work with Southern Command. But it's not just, you can't think of defending the homeland in a way that is only based or focused in North America. From the space-com perspective, everything we do is global. And so if you're concerned about missile launches from overseas locations, that's where our work starts. So that means we have to be tightly tied with INDOPACOM, if it's coming from that area, from UCOM, whatever the threat may be coming from. And so we have to be tightly tied in with the combatant commands. We have to be multi-domain, multi-combatant command, multi-service, allies, all those partnerships I've talked about in any form of structure that's going to be based on defense of the homeland or defense of our forces out in the field. We push really hard for that whole team sport approach of it takes that entire team to be able to operate. And it's difficult work. It's easy to say, it's easy to put on a PowerPoint slide. But the ability to command and control, to understand effects, to get the timing and tempo that has the most effect, because that's how we're really going to win against our adversaries, is that whole team working together in a synergistic effect, a holistic approach. A lot of buzzwords in there, but they really mean something. And they're all difficult to do. We don't shy away from it. Hard is authorized in our business, and we don't shy away from it. But it's a great question because it's a huge focus for U.S. Spacecom today. And I think, in my mind, the reason you have the United States Space Command and the reason you will maintain the United States Space Command into the future is to be able to do that mission, to integrate across all the services, all the combatant commands, our allies, into the academic world, into industry and our commercial. We have huge focus into industry today, and you'll see that in our commercial integration cell, our joint commercial operations cell, and our requirements processes that we continue to work and reach out to industry. Industry is going to help lead. How do we take that very hard problem set and in ways that we haven't thought about today? We're going to see that tennis ball falling out of the sky, and we're going to realize, hey, there's something else out there that we need to be ready for, and we're going to continue to innovate to get at the very answer to your question. I forgot one part of the tennis ball story I have to tell, because this is the most important part. We're flying over, dropping a few tennis balls out. My dad's on the end of this long asphalt driveway, and he's waving at the plane. He doesn't know what's going on. And suddenly, a tennis ball bounces 30 feet high right beside him. And I just wish I could have been there to watch that cognitive connection of, because there was a long speech after that. and we didn't drop anything out of airplanes anymore anyway. I discovered I don't think that's legal anymore.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your time. Thank you for what you do.
Very good. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning. I'm not sure what time it is. What it is. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, this is my third year doing this now as representing NDA up here. I think this may be the largest crowd. Just wondering what y'all are sticking around for. First off, I just want to thank ASMDA, ADAA, NDIA for putting this on every year. It's such an important symposium gathering for the missile defense enterprise to raise our game, raise our thoughts, our thinking, and become better defenders of our nation and our warfighters. So that's great. To Michael, Colonel United States Air Force retired, soon to be retired. Thanks for the last year of commitment to make this happen. You do look shorter and older. So this year, I'm really taking a look back as well. As I mentioned, this is my third time representing this defense agency as twice as director and once as a stand-in. But I'll tell you, I think it's important because as we look back, there's some common themes that have not changed. They are common to this business, common to this environment, and common to the challenges ahead of us. And many of us have been up here, to include my brother Sean Gainey, talking about one team, one fight, and really we are one team, one enterprise, and one fight at a historic moment in the history of the missile defense enterprise as we move forward. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, right off the bat, I just want to talk about your Missile Defense Agency and just a little bit of the history over the last 42 years. A challenging history, but also a history filled with many, many accomplishments that really have paved the way to the capabilities that have been demonstrated over the last 2 years in saving lives. From the very get-go, with General Reagan's charter to the Strategic Defense Initiative, Missile Defense Agency and our predecessing organizations have always been there to break through boundaries, to make the impossible possible. And very common, we've been told every year that we've been in existence that it'll never work, you're not doing it right, and you probably spent too much money and shouldn't exist. So that's pretty common over the last 42 years. But also in those 42 years, as we've gone through administration changes, world changes, we have certainly had to evolve and adjust to the current times and what the nation needs of us. Right towards the beginning, we were very clearly focused on strategic level, ballistic missile defense, eliminating the threat of strategic ballistic missiles from the planet. And then over time, as we went into Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and the like, we became much more focused on theater missile defense. And we certainly have grassroots and have done quite a bit in the theater missile defense route. Only then, in 2000, 2002, with President Bush and Secretary Rumsfeld's mandate, we got back into the strategic homeland defense game, and in 2 short years, developed and deployed the ground-based force defense system into the field in 2 years. Still the system that is protecting our homeland from intercontinental ballistic missiles as we went forward. And then over the last 20 years, we definitely got much more back into the theater missile defense, regional missile defense, and the like. And now we find ourselves here today with another sector change, another focus of how we move together. Also with those changes came priority, came focus, came resources, or not. And the ups and downs of the last 42 years have certainly followed a rhythm. And usually the rhythm is the president identifies a need, we get the focus, the resources, priority that is required, and we make enormously large changes to an enterprise. And then that doesn't last, and that focus goes away, the resources may thin out, and we continue the fight, and we continue the slog, evolving what we've just got done doing. And then 20 to 25 years later, we seem to get another presidential mandate, another priority based on the system, the threats in the world, the environment, and we do the same. So, 1983, certainly the first age of that, 2002 the second, and certainly today we're entering the third. I've said a number of times in public and in writing and things like that, for an acquisition development organization to make lasting change and to do it quickly, it needs 3 things. It needs the priority. That's priority on the national scale. It also has priority when it comes to access to decision makers and getting things done. It needs the authority to make decisions on its own. And it clearly needs the resources in talent and people, as well as in money. Certainly we're in a point where those 3 are once again on the upturn. In particular, I just want to point out a few things called out by the tests, but also the campaigns that we've been supporting to bring capability to the field. And really, they're items that I talked about last year and through the last year of commitments that we made to deliver in the past 12 months. So that FTX-26 Alpha flight was a retake based on a flight that didn't go quite so well a year and a half before that, when the target was in the ocean. And that was a culminating activity to show that that new large, long-range discrimination radar up in Alaska was ready to be integrated into the operational baseline and become one of our primary weapons, primary sensors for detecting inbound ICBMs from rogue nations, North Korea. With that successful FTX-26 Alpha, we also paved the way for the operational acceptance of the broader missile defense system, Increment 6 Bravo 2, many years in the making, but that brings the capability of LRR to fight. But it also brings in the two-stage, three-stage selectable capability of our ground-based interceptors, increasing our battle space, and a host of other capabilities brought to bear for protecting our homeland. On the regional piece, taking a look at ballistic missile defense, the very first test that was shown was the Flight Experiment 2, which was the demonstration of the ability with the TIPI-6, new TIPI-6 radar on the island of Guam. We sensed, detected, and defeated an airborne launched ballistic missile with an SM-3 from the island of Guam. We did that in less than 2 years from beginning the planning. We put the system in place, the first instantiation of the Aegis Guam system with that launcher. As well, we actually had to build the entire whole test range as well, since there was not an existing test range on the island of Guam. And that test was extremely successful and just part of General Rash and NDA's activities to push forward and defend the island of Guam going forward. Last year I mentioned THAAD 4.0 fielding. We were about halfway done, and we have completed the fielding of THAAD 4.0, which improves and brings capabilities to bear, interfacing Patriot with THAAD, and some other capabilities as well. On the hypersonic missile defense front, last year I announced the successful launch of the Hypersonic Ballistic Tracking Space Sensor prototype program, where we launched 2 demo satellites in February of last year, with the purpose of showing that from space we could show the appropriate level of sensitivity, quality, and timeliness to close a fire control loop against a hypersonic missile and hold that threat under custody throughout its time of flight. This year, I can tell you that we 100% successfully demonstrated all of the objectives of that program and are now working with the United States Space Force to operationalize that capability moving forward, a key aspect of our ability to hold any hypersonic missile at threat in the future as we go forward. Also, last year we talked about the SM-6 sea-based terminal capability, which is our only existing capability that's been test validated and fielded to counter and defeat a hypersonic missile moving forward. Through a number of testing events this past year, we have reached the official acceptance and certification of the Increment 3 level of capability for sea-based terminal, and it will be protecting our fleets and other locations as we move forward. A great milestone as we continue to try to defeat that very difficult threat. So I mentioned there's a lot of common themes through the years that still continue this year. A couple years ago, I briefed the top chart, and it really showed kind of our roots back in the Strategic Defense Initiative days and the like, where we were really focused on the ballistic missile threat of the age, lower number, less complex ballistic missiles, and it certainly was the challenge of the time, hitting a bullet with a bullet in outer space. Obviously now, we have regularly demonstrated the ability to be able to do that, but the world has changed significantly, partially in response to the fielding of the ballistic missile defense system of its age. And the threats have proliferated to multiple levels, multiple speeds, hypersonic maneuvering targets, cruise missiles, complex air threats, and the like, as we've been seeing in the last number of years, whether in Ukraine, whether in the defense of Israel, whether in test programs from a number of different countries. And so that is really the same threat that we have today. It continues to get more complex, it continues to proliferate, and we need to continually adjust and get ahead of the ballgame. But what has changed since last year? I just put out 2 things. One is the operationally proven architecture that we have. Up until a year and a half ago, the SM-3 1B and 2As had never been used in operational use, protecting U.S. warfighters or friends, as well as the THAAD Talon Interceptor. The THAAD weapon system had never been used by the U.S. in operations, and that has certainly changed over the last year and a half. I was up here last year talking about how the April 2024 launch salvo from Iran was the largest ballistic missile salvo that had been ever seen on the planet. And that was until October, when Iran launched even more ballistic missiles in a number of large salvos into Israel. Through those, both the Aegis weapon system as well later the THAAD weapon system, both there partnered with the Israeli Missile Defense Organization and the Israeli forces to protect the homeland. And then the 12-day war just this summer, in a 12-day period, over 500 ballistic missiles were launched out of Iran towards Israel, uniquely focused and targeted at the civilian population centers of the state of Israel. And once again, the THAAD weapon system, the Aegis weapon system, the missile defense system, command and control, battle management, communications, C2BMC connectivity, into the Israeli systems to provide a true layered IND, integrated air missile defense capability, really came to fruition. And just 2 weeks ago, I got a chance to catch up with Moshe Patel, the director of the Israeli Missile Defense Organization and a longtime partner of ours. And he just thanked the United States. He thanked the Missile Defense Agency, he thanked our U.S. troops, our U.S. sailors, for the countless hundreds and thousands of lives that have been saved over the last year and a half due to an operationally proven architecture. The other thing that's really changed, and really just in the last 6.5 months, is the national realization and recognition of the threat and the return of priority and focus on the missile defense enterprise, and as we all know, the new imperative to bring a national capability to bear. Let's go to the next slide. And so really, this should not come as a surprise to us. Last year, I talked about the Homeland Defense fight of the future that we foresaw and the need to be prepared for more complex ballistic missiles. Back then, last year, was focused on North Korea and Iran, but we had expected more complex countermeasures, increased capacity in capability, electronic warfare environments that we had not seen yet, and we had been preparing for that, and we're moving forward, specifically the next gen interceptor. On the regional fight, we had seen after Ukraine, after the defense of Israel and other locations, the proliferation of capabilities coming in at all levels. Again, with complex countermeasures, EWCs, and that was leading us down the path of the need for a 360-degree integrated air missile defense capability, I say from surface to space, but really that was the complex scene that we were seeing. And the use case that was number one focus last year, that we talked quite a bit about over the last couple of years, was defense of Guam. Defending Guam, it was a call for a 360-degree integrated air missile defense layered capability against all targets, surface to space. And then I would just posit then that really what we see today is all of those colliding together with the realization of the threat and the realization and recognition from the nation that we require that national 360-degree layered integrated air missile defense capability as we move forward. Let's go to the next slide. And I'll tell you, the Missile Defense Agency, we're ready. We're ready to be a part of this team. We always have been a part of this enterprise, and we're all ready to get after this one fight as we move forward. We continue to transform and adjust to the times and adjust to the need. Last year, I mentioned the challenges we faced, and I just highlighted some of the major lines of effort that we were pursuing as we look to transform the Missile Defense Agency into the Missile Defense Agency the nation needs, that we need. And I'll tell you, we continue driving down those. They were fortuitous that some of those we worked on in advance of January 27th. And it's just we've started to posture ourselves to really move forward at speed. In line of effort one, we're definitely looking to lead the charge into developing and evolving capabilities, to bringing disruptive tech to the fight, and always staying ahead of the emerging threat space, bringing the right capability at the right capacity at the right time. Our line of effort two is focused on the people. Like our technologies, we need fast and agile individuals, workforce. That includes our industry base and our partners that continue to break the boundaries that we need to, that don't take no for an answer, and when told they're doing the impossible, ignore that and continue to press on. We're going to need that as we go forward as a missile defense family. Three, near and dear to me, is the transformation of the how we do business. Our processes, our procedures, our toolkit. Digital transformation, certainly at the center, but even beyond that, the culture. How do we truly go faster? How do we truly think bigger? And how do we truly answer what our nation's calling us to do today? And then lastly, 2 years ago, I remember looking at Dave Stewart and saying, we were focused on the warfighter and what he needed, and the last 2 years I've been looking and meeting with Sean Gainey regularly about what do we need to bring to the fight and what our forces need. We need to inform, we need to educate, we need to continue to raise everybody's game on the importance of this capability, on the importance of the threat and its growing capability, and what we're going to do about it, and how we're going to collaborate. And frankly, we don't have a lot of fantasies in the future. We have a proven architecture with a whole host of proven capabilities that can change the defense posture of the world today. And we still need to look for more disruptive technology. We still need to learn how to change the cost calculus of the game. How do we increase magazine depth at a more affordable price tag? How do we do that? Back in 1983, the visionary words and requests of President Reagan and the Strategic Defense Initiative investments of the 80s and early 90s. Some in the public will say that it's been a waste of time and a waste of effort, a complete failure. I'll tell you, those investments in the 1980s and 1990s are the foundation that led us to the capabilities that we just used over the last 2 years to save lives. And so I'm not sure if I would chalk that up as a failure. I think it was a must-have investment in the technology needed for the future to change the game. We also need to invest in the disruptive technologies of today so we can set the foundation for tomorrow as we move forward. Go to the next slide, the last slide. So, we're adjusting, and we continue to adjust to the need. We also need all of you. You've always been there with us, partnered with us, part of this one enterprise, to raise our game and address and adjust to what is needed of us. Well, we need to do that again. What has gotten us here isn't what's going to get us to where we need to be, and we need to continue to look at our foundations and improve those as we go forward. Because the nation is once again calling on us to bring real capabilities at real capacity against a real threat as we move forward. So, let's all step up, raise our game. We really look forward to you partnering with us as we move forward. It's our time once again to make a major change to this world and a major change to this game, and I look forward to being a partner with you. All I can say is, let's get ready to go fast and think big. I thank you for staying around. I'm sure many of you all see this afternoon. And as you probably can understand, I will not be taking any questions today. In the last 6 months, I've walked into many, many rooms and said, I can't take any questions on you know what. And I've never received a question other than something about you know what. So, so we'll just avoid that and we'll move on. I look forward to seeing many of you this afternoon and definitely in the years to come. Let's take advantage of this. It's a fleeting moment. As history has shown, this doesn't last forever, and we need to make a monster change now. So thanks all, and thanks again for this opportunity.
Area of responsibility. And the threats that we have to contend with in this area of responsibility, they range from everywhere from the strategic down to the tactical, and the geographic span of these threats are across the entire part of the AOR. When you think about whether it's Korea, whether it's Japan, operations in the Philippines, Guam Defensive System defending Hawaii, all the way through to having to address threats that might start in the Indo-PACOM theater targeting the United States. In this panel here, across all domains, are the experts who allow us to think about this, talk about what their operations are in support of defense of the Indo-PACOM against all threats, to include space. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Newman, who's going to lead us off, and then we're just going to go down from the Bill, then the Navy, down to Tony. So, everybody's much to hold you.
Thanks, Dan. Good morning, everyone. G'day, because I'm an Aussie. Aloha, because I'm from Hawaii. And I lived in Alabama for 3 years, so how do you say g'day? I'm trying. What's an Aussie doing up here representing Indo-PACOM with a number of coalition embedded into the various forces across the island there in Indo-PACOM? It's my privilege to be the Australian Deputy Commander embedded into PACA. So what I will talk to today is not an Australian perspective, it is an Indo-PACOM perspective. I'm here representing General Schneider, Commander of Pacific Air Forces, and his many hats. He's responsible for generating air power, force generating United States Air Force air power for the Indo-Pacific. He's the Joint Force Air Component Commander to Admiral Paro, and importantly for this forum, he's the Theatre Area Air Defence Commander for Indo-Pacific. So I'll be giving a perspective representing him. It's an absolute privilege being part of that organisation and doing something so consequential. And it's consequential because Indo-PACOM has a number of acute challenges. And it's challenges not just for Indo-PACOM, but it's a theatre that I think for our generation is the most consequential one across the world. There's lots happening in Europe, there's lots happening in the Middle East and around the world, but it is where great power competition is playing out. It is probably where the rules and norms and how our societies evolve into the future will be set based on the actions that we take today and over the next decade. And the challenges that we face in this consequential theatre are many. There are a number of actors. Russia, whilst engaged heavily in its immoral and illegal campaign in the Ukraine, is still very active within our theatre. From an area defence perspective, they test and probe air defence networks routinely, long-range aviation. They are active in the Alaska region, which impacts Indo-PACOM, through the Sea of Japan and testing both Japanese and Republic of Korea agencies all the time. And they have a nexus with the North Koreans. And the North Koreans are incredibly active as they're building quite a sophisticated missile deck. With help now from the Russians, which brings a great deal of concern, and building an inventory that is destabilising not just to the peninsula, but to the region writ large. And then there's China. China has been, over the last number of decades, as you all know, modernising at pace, at an incredible pace. Their missile capability and their air capability has substantially grown to what was nowhere near a near-peer competitor to now a true peer competitor for not just the United States, but a coalition writ large within the area. The numbers and capability that they have grown to and the trend and pace at which they continue to grow is extraordinary. And that we know that will continue, and for a country that has risen economically, that is to have been expected. But from an Indo-PACOM perspective, what's most concerning is the lack of transparency around what that growth is. The offensive capabilities that they're producing is not coming with a good explanation as to the why. We're also seeing a country that is using that offensive capability with greater and greater confidence, and more times with a set of aggression that is transgressing international rules and international norms that has benefited the region over the last 50, 60, 70 years. And so that is a concerning threat. A threat that includes and will test us at speed. The hypersonic capabilities that are being developed will reduce our decision-making time as we look at that. The deep magazine depth that they hold in their long-range fires creates acute challenges for us in the Indo-Pacific, and their ability from decades ago, from having attack axes that numbered in the single digits to now 360-degree axis of attack, pretty much able to reach out anywhere across the Indo-Pacific AOR. That creates significant challenge. From an INDOPACOM perspective, Admiral Paparo wants to preserve peace through the projection of strength. And that is a really important piece to do. We need to deter whoever the actor is, aggression that challenges those international standards, those international laws, those international rules and norms that has benefited everyone, globally and within the region. But to project strength, we need to ensure that not only do we have the offensive capability, the ability to swing that blow if needed, that gives an adversary pause, we need to make sure we do that without the glass jaw. Admiral Paparo quite rightly says he wants to preserve second mover legitimacy while having first mover advantage. So we may have to absorb a blow. We can't take a blow with a glass jaw and be able to swing one back that will get the job done. So to be able to project strength, we need to ensure that we have those protection capabilities in place that tells an adversary, you cannot harm us, you cannot stop us from wielding the full might of a coalition to prevent you from achieving any aims should you choose to use military capability to do so. From a theatre area defence perspective then, General Schneider has an incredibly important mission on behalf of INDOPACOM. How does he ensure that he has the capabilities across the theatre that can protect the joint force and the joint force mission to be able to project military power and strength? There's a number of needs that General Schneider will have to be able to do that. We need integrated and layered joint defences. It's not an Air Force mission, it's not an Army mission, it's not a Navy mission, it's not a space mission. We need to be able to bring air, land, sea and space sensors and effectors and command and control systems together. And we need to be able to protect against those upper, middle and lower tier threats. Any systems that roll out and form part of that integrated network will need to do so under contest. So we can't have a system that's so brittle that an action from an adversary causes the whole protection architecture to collapse. We need resilience within all of the systems that are brought to bear to bring that area air defence capability into theatre. And it needs to have graceful degradation. We know there are elements that will come under attack. It needs an architecture such that we can continue to provide and adjust capabilities to provide levels of protection to the joint force. The way INDOPACOM will operate across the theatre, if deterrence fails and we do get to crisis and have to fight together as a joint force, we expect the tempo will be quick, we expect we will be required to make decisions quickly, we expect the joint force to manoeuvre quickly. Any protection system that comes, any area defence architecture needs to be able to support that manoeuvre. It needs to be agile, it needs to be able to shift quickly, It cannot be systems that require fleets of C-17s or large ships to move in order to lay protection down as theatre posture changes. We may need to move and adjust incredibly quickly, and anything that we can do to modulise to increase the agility of the protection systems will be important. I talked about an integrated architecture. That is incredibly important. It needs to be a C2 architecture that can command theatre-wide, centrally if required, but also through distributed joint multiple C2 nodes. Whether that's a C2 node that sits in Guam or Japan or the Philippines or Australia or Diego Garcia or anywhere within the theatre, and are connected to others when they can, but can operate independently if they must. And systems that come together and sit within that C2 architecture that are integrated. I cannot have the United States Air Force Tactical Operations Centre with a picture that is slightly different to Army's integrated battle command system with a slightly different picture, which is different to Navy's Aegis command and control system with a slightly different picture, all identifying the one entity with slightly different tracks. That is an inefficient way of doing business, an ineffective way of doing business. We need all of those systems to integrate and provide the same decision-making quality information at all of those nodes so that we can respond appropriately. And not just for the joint force, we need to do that across the coalition. If we fight for something that is right, we will never fight alone. And as an Australian, I can tell you, since World War I, shoulder to shoulder, Australians and the US have fought together, and that will be true in this theatre, and it will be true across a broad coalition, whether it's Japanese self-defence force, whether it's the Republic of Korea, whether it's Philippines, whether it's the broad range of allies and partners that will come together who are interested in upholding stability in the region, who are interested in protecting those international rules and norms. We need to be able to bring that collective might to the fight, because the challenge is large. And those countries will bring capabilities that we will need. We cannot afford to have them federated. We need to bring them into the system and have them integrated within their senses, their effectors, and their command and control decision-making sets. And the time of crisis is not the time to do that. We need to be doing that now. We need to ensure that the technical standards are there. We have as broadly an open system architecture across systems as we possibly can that allows seamless data sharing and interoperability. And I think that technical standard's close, if not already there. I'm less concerned about the technical means to share data as I am the policy barriers that we put in place. And it's policy barriers across both governments, plural, and industries. Governments need to ensure that we've got these sharing agreements in place. We've done the hard work to understand the risks, and we allow that data sharing to occur because of the benefits that it will bring. From an industry perspective, we need to ensure that we don't hide behind IP, intellectual property that prevents us from doing the sharing work that might be necessary from one country's collection of capability to another's that may cross industry boundaries. So that will be important. From a theatre area defence commander perspective, we need whatever is brought to be sustainable. We're facing such a deep magazine depth from a number of potential adversaries in the theatre. That could mean that we need to fight for a considerable period of time against an adversary's long-range kill chain. We need effectors and sensors that can be quickly replaced and sustained, that are easy to use, that provides a counter magazine depth that will be required and does not place an unnecessary burden on our supply chain, because we know that our logistics across the Indo-Pacific theatre will be contested. Each theatre has its own unique challenges. From an Indo-Pacific theatre perspective, the time and distance that we will have to operate across, the wide expanses of water that we will need to operate across, bring those challenges, particularly in the logistics space. We may not have full maritime domain superiority, full air superiority, so anything that we can do to alleviate the supply chain that needs to operate in those areas will be important. Those things aren't easy. To be able to bring together joint, allied, partnered systems in an integrated fashion that can create a common picture with a common decision-making set of tools that allow coherent and synchronised decisions across the joint force for theatre, air and missile defence will be difficult work to do, and it is difficult work to do. But we're making progress. We will continue to push for that joint force architecture, an architecture that's integrated by design. And we're seeing that as we pull out, and I know Bill will talk a little bit more about the Guam defensive system. I think that's showcasing a way ahead for the joint force. We're seeing relationship building across allies and partners in the region and agreements being established that bring in that coalition force. We're seeing exercises that are running. Pacific Air Forces has just completed refuel pack exercise, which included a large area defence component to that. We're learning a great deal of exercises as we're bringing in capabilities from across the joint force. We need to continue those reps and sets, and we need to bring industry to those as well, so you can better understand our challenges and you can better help us connect those key pieces of equipment that will be important to the fight. So here in the Pacific, where we're kind of at the nexus of great power competition, and where I said those rules and challenges, rules and norms are challenged every day, we need to continue to do that work at pace. We need to accelerate what we can that provides that protective layer that reduces the vulnerability of the jaw and tells an adversary you cannot hurt us enough to prevent us from stopping you from achieving any aims that you may have through illegitimate and illegal and immoral military force. Willing to explore all of those questions that you might have when we get to there, but I'd like to then pass to the next member of the panel who can perhaps talk a few more, and provide you a little bit more detail on where we're heading with capability. Thanks.
So aloha, hafade, ohio gozaimasu, good day, and all the other different languages that are spoken in the Pacific. On behalf of the INDOPACOM team, thanks for having us up here and allow us to talk about not only what we live on a daily basis, but the very, and as Vice Marshal Newman pointed out, the very complicated environment that which we operate in the competition phase and will certainly operate in conflict when that time, if and when it comes. So, first off, to put into context, and it's always hard to follow the Aussie, but to kind of put in context, what does a AAMDC commander do in the Pacific? And I know we have some Sea Dragon 6 emeritus among us today. So traditionally, we've really worn three hats. One as, the Senior Army Air Defense Commander for the theater. We also have a hat that we wear, which is the Theater Air Missile Defense Coordinator for the land component, so to the USARPAC Commander, being his Integrated Air Missile Defense Advisor and Planner. And then we have a very important role that we play as the Deputy Area Air Defense Commander to the Air Component Commander, or the Area Air Defense Commander. And that direct support relationship that we have there, we spend a lot of time enculturing, because that who maintains the authorities for the integrated air missile defense fight that we would execute in the Pacific. Now that's what, General Carver, General Gibson, they wore those three hats as emeritus. Well, we now have a new hat as the Senior Army Element Commander of Guam, newly established within the course of the last month. And obviously that ties directly to, the Army's contribution to the efforts that we have within the Guam defense system. So as Vice Marshal Newman laid out, there are several things that General Schneider and the PACAF team are looking at within that very complex environment that we have within INDOPACOM, being able to enhance our ability to operate within that very time-sensitive fight that we will have once we transition, from competition to conflict. And that decentralized control within that space is going to be critical. When seconds matter, to have authorities pushed down to the right point in the fight so that we can effectively engage and defeat the threats that are presented to us. But in order to get to that point, right, that commander has to have a level of confidence in the capabilities that he can bring to bear against the potential adversary. And I think, with where we have come over the last few years, I think the commander does have the confidence between what we've executed in terms of Project Convergence Capstone 4, Capstone 5, those AFC efforts, Operation Sling Stone, which we executed this past December, where we are bringing joint command and control systems together to be able to execute that mission that we would have in the defense of Guam. That level of confidence in being able to bring the improvements that PO Missile Space and General Lozano and team have brought forward as we have some of the early prototypes for IBCS in theater. The improvements that's been made with the talk light system that the Air Force uses and the ability to integrate those capabilities through the Joint Track Management Capability Bridge, which again we've executed in both experimentation and through exercises, both back here in the States and in the Pacific. That is allowing us to more effectively deconflict the airspace and know what's out there through our air battle managers, as well as distribute fires within that space with our air defense artillery fire control officers. As we are moving forward into the future, we now have U.S. personnel attending the Air Defense Artillery Fire Control Officer course in Australia. So a lot of these, we talked from a joint perspective, we can also talk to it from a combined perspective, and the ability to do what we just did in Talisman Sabre 25, where we established a combined IAD task force headquarters at RAF Darwin, and we executed that deconfliction and distribution of fires from using both U.S. and Australian fire control officers to do that, really begins to add more and more level of confidence to be able to do this and delegate authorities down from the commander's perspective. We have the ability now through technology with our integrated battle command system to be able to get to the concept, and sure, I know how long we've been talking about this, the any sensor best shooter, but I like to frame it in terms of any sensor most efficient and effective shooter. Because now we are taking a look at the magazine problem that Vice Marshall Newman talked about, in ensuring that we are distributing fires in the most efficient and effective way that we possibly can, to be able to account for a problem where quantity has a quality all the time. You know, we have seen the improvements with the air battle manager's capability to execute that fight within the TOC light system. And again, all these systems, you know, are continuing to improve over time. The Joint Track Management Capability Bridge, from a joint perspective, has really started to scratch the surface of being able to, you know, to take another service's sensor data and use that sensor data across another service's effector. Significant because we've now broken that traditional sensor-shooter paradigm from a joint perspective. Now, we've still got some ways to go, and I know Joe Rash and his team are working hard on the Joint Integrated Battle Manager JIBL system. We're still doing that distribution of fires in a swivel chair type mentality, but to have a means from a joint and perspective to have AI-driven decision aids that would allow us to ensure that we are, one, not getting under-engagement, two, not getting over-engagement, which now affects that magazine depth issue, but having that capability present to help those human beings work within what is now a cognitive convoluted environment and assist them in being able to ensure that we don't have over or under engagements on any specific threats. But at the end of the day, you know, it's not perfect yet, but we can clearly see where we are on a glide path to getting to where we know that we need to be. You know, right now, I would argue, and again, this is Bill Parker's opinion, so this and $5 will buy you a cup of coffee at Starbucks, but I believe we are now in the most significant era of AMD modernization in history. Given, you know, all those systems that I've just talked about, given, again, PO missile to space work with the new lower tier air missile defense sensor, which we now have two prototypes that are currently within our theater that we're going to kick the tires on. We're going to do some learning. We're going to see how it performs, and we're going to help influence, you know, continual improvements to that system by just having it in our hands. And it's not only the material improvements, but it's also helping inform Glenn Hankey and his team back at Fort Sill along the lines of doctrine, organization, training, leader development that we need to focus on in order to not only have this capability just for Guam, just for the Pacific, but have it where we can export that capability more effectively across other theaters. So we very much look forward to being able to do that. We are also lined up as part of the Chief's plan for acceleration, much like our LTAMS radar, to receive the FPIC capability very soon. As a matter of fact, I believe it's on a boat right now chugging our way. Looking forward to taking these new types of capabilities, put them in the hands of soldiers, which aligns perfectly with where Joe George wants to go in terms of accelerating capability, transformation and contact, those types of concepts. And seeing how we can take these new technologies and fight differently, much like we are doing with the Guam defense system. Because if we took these new systems and fought them in the same traditional ways that we have traditionally fought Patriot in the past, then shame on us. We have to look at how we can gain effectiveness and efficiencies in using these new technologies. And I see where we are at within the Pacific and being the foundation to learning how we can do that. As a matter of fact, we will learn from the Guam Defense System. We will learn from 35th ADA's use of being able to composite IFPC and Patriot capability together to further enhance what we can defend from an IND perspective. Again, looking to be able to export what we learn across the force to make us all better as these capabilities proliferate throughout the Army. So, Vice Marshal Newman talked about, that's kind of from an Army joint perspective, but from a combined perspective with our allies and with our partners, he 100% hit the nail on the head. The data is super important. The data is really the primacy of what will enable the fight within this very complex environment where we have tyranny of distance, where we have the potential to have multiple malign actors within our AOR. But being able to share that data, because we know that we haven't fought alone in a really long time, and that will not change. And it will take us coming together when we do cross that line between competition and conflict to be successful and to be able to enable the joint and the combined force to execute that mission for the combatant commander. But overcoming these hurdles are going to be critical, and these are not new hurdles. We've been talking about these hurdles for years, whether it be policy, whether it be IP issues, whether it be classification issues that we have to overcome, because that data is going to get us to where we need to be effective and be able to win that next fight. So with that, I've been talking for a really long time, and so I'll go ahead and pass it to whoever's next.
Hey, thanks, Joe.
Kate, over to you, please.
Mike, there we go. Good morning, everyone. I'll echo the comments of my fellow panelists. It's really an honor to be here. Second year in a row here at the SMD Symposium. It's a pleasure to be here from Hawaii. Couldn't wait to get away from those islands. Said no one ever. It's really phenomenal to be out here, and the conversations that are going on are really great. Whether it's here in the concert hall or out in the hallways, seeing and talking to many of you, I think the right conversations are happening at the right time. I'm here partially, or not partially, but I'm fully representing my boss, the new commander of Space Forces Indo-Pacific, Brigadier General Brian Ucho Dinero. We come up with the best call signs in the Space Force. He is the Theater Joint Space Force Component Commander, and in that, very much takes seriously the coordination and command role that he has there. Space Forces Indo-Pacific, for those of you that don't know, we're only 2.5 years old. We're teething, I suppose, is where we're at. I don't have any kids, but I imagine if you guys do, you know what the terrible twos are like. We're growing rapidly. From a year and a half, or 2.5 years ago, give or take, we had about 20 folks. Now 160, which is great. It's very, very big for us, very small in relation to the other components in INDOPACOM. I think Pac Fleet likes to talk about how they have 135,000 sailors across, hundreds of vessels. I think we might be at the point now where we could put one Guardian on each Navy vessel in the theater, if we chose to do so. But our mission is pretty straightforward. It's essential. We plan, coordinate, and deliver space capabilities that enhance the full range of military operations at the behest of the INDOPACOM commander. I think key is something that we understand here, but I wouldn't be a good Guardian if I didn't bring up that space is no longer just a supporting backdrop to what we do. whether it's in INDOPACOM or elsewhere. It's a vital warfighting domain that underpins every aspect of operations across the military spectrum. Specifically, I think sometimes when we really look at it, it's enabling the long-range kill chain and allowing for global power projection. The need is real. We've talked about it a little bit already, but I'll go into some specific space-related examples. Looking over the past decade, so since the end of 2015, the PRC's on-orbit presence has grown by 500%. This includes over 470 intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance satellites, and that includes optical, multispectral radar, RF sensors, and this only increases their ability to detect and track our terrestrial forces, from carrier strike groups to operators deployed around the theater, air wings, you name it. It's really, as Air Vice Marshall Newman brought up, they have moved into the clear, peer category of the threat. Just in the last year, to really put a point on this, China conducted 68 total launches, of which 66 were successful. Those launches placed 260 payloads in orbit. 67 of them were ISR-capable satellites. It is no joke the speed at which China is advancing their space capabilities. We are not losing sight on that, and I think that's why I enjoy being here with U.S. industry, because at the end of the day, there's no one more capable and able to bring forward the best capabilities in the world than the people who are in this room. I know this from conversations I've had and where you all are moving and how we want to partner with you to bring those capabilities forward at a speed that is relevant to change the way we fight in the theater. China's developing the space architecture that underpins. Satellites are great. I think, as a space guy, as a guardian, I think we always like to look up into the space domain. And satellites are pretty sexy, they're cool, technologically advanced. The architecture that underpins all of that and allows the data to flow in an efficient and timely manner to get the information to the tactical edge warfighter is vital. I don't think that sometimes we focus on that enough. It's data transport, sense making, information development, and information dissemination, which is key. I think one of the things that, as we look at the value of what U.S. industry is bringing, is U.S. and allied capabilities together. I think where we see partnership, that's really important to working together better. I know Air Vice Marshall Newman is an Australian on the panel, but he's representing PACAF in his role there as the deputy commander. We also have Australians embedded with us when we do exercises, and we are partnering with really one of our closest allies in the theater. We understand that having capabilities that are not U.S. only, especially the dreaded word no form, it's frustrating here because we know that in a fight, we do not fight in a no form way. We fight in a yes form way, and we have to really embrace that. So as we develop new capabilities, I underpin this with every engagement that I have, that it has to be done in a way that it is shareable across the board, and that's with Korea, Japan, and others as well. We're really serious in the Space Force and in Space Force INDOPAC about working with industry. A couple examples. In the last quarter, met with several dozen companies, and out of those engagements, we've moved forward with about 25% of them to offer direct endorsements, whether that's direct-to-face to SIVRs, strat-PIs, TAC-PIs, you name it, because where we see promising technologies whether it's endorsements through DIU, OSDR&E, or other organizations, we want to ensure that there's a path to get the cutting-edge, novel ideas and capabilities that you all are developing, and ensure that they are on a pathway to transition into a program of record or whatever the right approach is for a specific thing, that we can get those technologies out to us in INDOPACOM where they're going to make a difference. I think it's extremely important that we sometimes, I'm also an acquirer, and space acquisitions gets kind of poo-pooed quite a bit. I think people have the right approach, that we have to move as fast as possible using all of the options that the federal acquisition regulation allows to move quickly and not be bogged down in slow, decade-long development cycles. I think I will leave you with just a couple things. I do realize we want to get to Q&A, and Tony's sitting here thinking, hold on, let's talk about the important stuff, Guam defense. But I think the key to effective and efficient multi-domain warfare is the partnership between government programs and industry innovation. And it is us working together that is going to advance those capabilities and move the needle on the next generation of deterrence and defeat if we move into conflict. So with that, I'm looking forward to the questions when we get there, but I think, Tony, it's over to you for sterling words of wisdom.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it. Actually, what I was thinking is you and I are over here at the kids' table. So, good morning. Thanks for the invitation. I've been on this stage a few times in various different capacities, both Army and Joint. I speak to you today with the Army patch on my shoulder, but actually from a Joint perspective. So I serve as the Executive Director of the Joint Program Office for the Guam Defense System. You see RICTO up there, and so let me explain really kind of the rationale and the difference there. So in June of 23, while I was still in the Joint Staff leading the Joint Integrated Air Missile Defense Organization, the WSECDEF tasked the Army as the Service Acquisition Executive for the Guam Defense System. Pursuant to the GDS named in NDAA 23 as an ACAT 1 Delta acquisition category, which is the highest possible category that has joint interest. So it's controlled from a requirements perspective by the Joint Requirements Council, formerly the Joint Requirements Oversight Council, as well as the Defense Acquisition Executive, who serves as our milestone decision authority. So I'm also sitting here talking to you from a program office perspective as an operator and an air defender. I'm not an acquisition officer. So the vision that kind of came into place was as the Army was designated as the SAE, then the OSD for Acquisition and Sustainment named Lieutenant General Rash, who is the RICTO Director in his Army role, as the Joint Program Executive Officer for the Guam Defense System, now in a joint role. So our office is embedded with RICTO here in Huntsville, and the interesting and most challenging but yet exciting part of what we do is we don't own any of the systems that are going to Guam. 22 separate platforms from across the services and agencies to support the requirements of the INDOPACOM commander to solve a pretty hefty problem for what is probably one of the most strategic locations in the Pacific, and a place that can be easily isolated and cut off during a fight. So from a JPEO perspective, the JPO, the Joint Program Office, was established in February 24, so not very long ago. Certainly after most of these programs were either in place, have already been fielded, or are continuing to be in development, but yet have a fielding plan for their various services. We don't have the Title 10 authority, but we do have configuration control authority, as the JPEO, General Rash, is the configuration control authority for the Guam Defense System. Why is he that configuration control authority and not someone else from an operational perspective? I think for a couple of reasons. Number one, the systems, many of these systems are still in development. The prototypes, for example, that General Parker talked about, we're just now starting to put on the ground. We're starting to learn about what their capabilities truly are. Because if you've dealt with these systems at any point, you know that we can model them as much as we can model them, but we don't really actually know how they react to environments and various different sensor environments and frequency environments and environmental environments until we get them on the ground and understand them better. We are working to synchronize, and really our chief priority and mandate is to synchronize across all of these programs. So think of an integrated master schedule from an acquisition perspective for a single program, and then from a service perspective, trying to synchronize all those together, and then trying to stitch all of that together from across all of the services, as well as the Missile Defense Agency, from a doctrine, organization, training, material, leadership and development, personnel, facilities and policies, or joint PFP requirements perspective. A capability does not exist just by creating the actual platform. A capability exists when it's employable on the ground. And in synchronizing all of the joint PFP across all of the services, when there is no joint entity that actually does that on a regular basis, is something that we've had to actually take on. So we serve as that synchronizing authority across all of those platforms. We don't decide the requirements for those platforms. That stays on the Title 10 side. We help synchronize and integrate those platforms once they're ready. What we do is we have kind of a hybrid acquisition approach from the aspect of what needs to go to Guam and when it needs to be there and how we're synchronizing all of that .mil PFP. We're using an MTA rapid fielding pathway. That allows us to ensure that we can synchronize the capabilities of those systems as they are available. An example would be, as the system is being developed, maybe it's not meeting its full capability requirements yet, yet we need it to be fielded in Guam in order to meet requirements in Guam operationally. And so we have to understand what those limitations and those constraints are so we can plan through those and we can build and refine the architecture. So that's one aspect of what we do. The second part of our hybrid acquisition approach is a software pathway. We're using a software pathway because we're responsible for developing the capability that does not exist today that everyone on my right has already spoken about, which is the ability to integrate these systems. There is no capability to integrate joint tactical fire control at the fire control level. All of these systems, built as they were, being built as they are now, which is more open architecture, still really are service-centric. They're intended to meet service requirements, which is exactly what they were being built for. But as we've seen recently, and really as I've known in my 30 years of air defense, we cannot fight that way. We especially can't fight that way in a Guam fight. Imagine, if you will, this table, and each one of us represents a different C2 fire control system. Whether it's the Aegis Guam system, it's the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense or THAAD system, it's IBCS with a multi-tier capability of sensors and a network of effectors, or it's NVA C2 BMC, or it's the Air Force's Talk Light. Those are the main 5 C2 systems that we're really focused on right now. But imagine we're all one of those operators for each one of those systems. And we're in an experiment or an exercise where they're throwing a PRC, DPRK, North Korean threat at us as if we were fighting out of Guam. And we're able to talk to each other. As we're seeing what we can see on our warfighter machine interfaces, our screens,
with our systems. We've done that with operators, and as they do that, and they're very skilled, we bring the most skilled operators to really see where our gaps are. And as we experiment with this, no matter how close they are, how much they can talk to each other in that fight, they cannot deconflict fires fast enough. The reasons why they can't deconflict fires fast enough is because, number one, they can't see what the other one is seeing. So they end up firing at the same things. So we talked a little bit about kinetic interceptor wastage. That's a huge concern for us in a place like Guam, where you're really not going to be able to react to resupply needs as you need to, where you can do that in other places in the globe. The other main issue is that by doing that, it's also possible to miss targets. So I'll use, in some cases, I'll use some real-world events where we've had multinational service-specific air missile defense systems all fire at the same threat all at one time. We can't procure fast enough and rebuild that capacity fast enough to be able to maintain that kind of fighting. And so we're really trying to solve that problem. We started with building joint requirements from the Joint Staff that really involves joint planning for IND systems. That was approved in 2017. We also approved a joint requirement for joint tactical integrated fire control in 2021. Also in 2021, we approved a joint engagement coordination ICD that really leverages the system's capabilities at the fire control level across all the services to understand and share measurement data across each of those service platforms. So General Parker talked about a lot of what we've experimented with in Project Convergence and other exercises and experiments. And what we have found is when we do that, those systems now can pass data back and forth using their own language. All we have to do is translate that language from one system to another. But what we need is we need a capability above those to serve as kind of a risk management function in terms of helping to direct joint engagements. We have a lot of history in terms of how our firing doctrine works from service to service to service. And it's pretty parochial, it's very cultural, and it's outdated. And what we aim to do is understand that battle space better so that we can conserve very expensive and very valuable interceptors for the right fight. So imagine, if you will, maybe we have an SM-3 or an SM-6 in the architecture, or we have a Patriot MSE, or we have an E-9X in the architecture. And they all have different capabilities. Most of those capabilities overlap. Maybe we have a THAAD Talon capability. And when we have all of those and we put them together on such a small space to do a very important mission, we want to make sure that we're integrating them to the fashion that we can fire maybe a single one of one and follow that with a single one of another across the service. We don't have a capability that does that right now, except over the phone. That's how we do that today. That's how we've been doing it for a long time. The Joint Engagement Coordination ICD also directed automated battle management. And the automation part of this is extremely important, because what I'm most worried about in a fight like this is task saturation for our operators, is having all of this information now that we're potentially going to provide them, and them having to work out really what that risk is and try to make very critical decisions and be overwhelmed and not be able to make those decisions fast enough. So we're developing what's called the Joint Integrated Battle Manager, or JIBM. That's our software pathway, that's our product that our team is working on. We have a team of system and software engineers working with industry to develop that right now. We hope to have a prototype of that capability for demonstration by Valiant Shield in June of 26. But we also hope to have a prototype of the first ever joint IAD planner that takes the real models of these capabilities and puts them together and allows planners to understand how they'll interact with each other. Everything from, yes, where do you need to put a sensor, where do you need to put an effector, how do you implement and leverage non-kinetic capability, but also how do you work in an environment that is extremely congested from a frequency management perspective. How do these sensors interact together, and how do we communicate? So the JIBM, or the Joint Integrated Battle Manager, will help an operator determine what the right course of action is across multiple platforms and multiple C2s. The way I like to think of C2 is very much the way we think of effectors and sensors. We always talk about layered integrated air and missile defense from the effector and the sensor perspective. How far can the sensor see? How deep can it sense? How far does that allow a kinetic capability to affect a threat? What can we do with non-kinetic capability? We have to start thinking about the same layered and integrated environment for C2 layers in terms of how we're doing that. And so this is, from my perspective, as we talk about this JIBM, we're really talking about a limited area defense, kind of tactical integrated fire control capability. But we're not just talking about ground-based air and missile defense. We're talking about all domain air and missile defense and how we fight collectively. So we've had many conversations with the commander of INDOPACOM as well as the commander of PACAF and all of the leaders across INDOPACOM in terms of what they really want to see from this. So from Huntsville, Alabama, the JPO is trying to do this synchronization across a joint and interagency whole of government enterprise. Next week will be the second joint summit in Hawaii, so I get to join you over there. We have over 250 stakeholders that are either providing capability or operating that capability. We have to make doctrinal decisions because these are things that we haven't done before in terms of how we're fighting and how we need to fight. We have to understand the isolation that's going to occur in Guam and what that effect is going to be on an IAV system. We have to continue to experiment in that battle space, which is what we're going to do. We have to take MDA's Joint Track Management capability and really leverage the capability that they're providing us so that we can understand how these systems can operate together. We're using you to help us understand the maturity of technology. One of the things that we're trying not to do is rigidize a requirements process that lays out exactly what we think we need and then ask you to build against that requirement. As you continue to develop and leverage technology, we want to be able to leverage that technology as well. And so we're really looking at this from a different perspective, and that's how we're using the RICTO culture from a prototyping perspective that allows us to do that. And so we're learning from it. I've learned a lot over the last couple of days, as well as all of my engagements that I've continued with our industry partners, because I think that's the most important part. But things like the integration of THAAD and IBCS within the Army are going to allow us to use that sensor, the TIPI-2, for example, as a joint sensor now for fire control, not just for a single weapon system. And we're doing that across the board, across these 22 platforms. But the one thing we can't forget is when we do all of this, when we create these capabilities that have enormous opportunity for how we fight the future, we have to address the doctrine and cultural ways that we're thinking. We have to think about this differently. We have to understand that we have to employ in a flexible manner, and we have to ensure that as we're supporting any combat commander, that what we're developing within this particular location is terrain agnostic. What we're taking to Guam, hopefully by the time that we start developing the prototype, is exportable anywhere. And once we do it and we can actually be successful doing it, this can be available to any warfighter on the globe. So thank you, appreciate that.
Hey, thanks, Tony. This panel would have been excellent in testimony because they filibustered their way right out of not being able to answer any questions. No, but in the interest of time, we want to stay respectful to everything that's going to go on here. But I want to thank all the panel members. Please afford yourself the opportunity to ask questions within after the panel and catch up with them. General Formica probably is mad at me because I didn't, give them the shepherd's hook earlier and keep them on time, but they had so much good information to provide. I wanted to make sure that they had that opportunity to do so. So if we could, one more round of applause for our panel. Thanks.